Hello, I'm Jeff Carter with Seattle CityClub, and today, as part of the Civic Bootcamp on local government and politics, I'll be talking with Orlando Cano, contract lobbyist with OneAmerica, Chief Seattle Club, Group Health Foundation, and the State Board of Education, and Washington STEM. So thank you, Orlando, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So let me just start out with a very general question. What is a lobbyist, and especially what does a contract lobbyist do?
Well, typically a contract lobbyist is somebody who is hired on behalf of a client, an organization, maybe even a coalition of groups that need representation and need to be to channel and voice their policy agendas or even budgetary agenda items to policymakers. So you'll find lobbyists both in the halls of our state capitol in Olympia, or as well here at the local level and in various local governments, but obviously here in City Hall in Seattle and at King County as well. So again, we work on a variety of public policy issues, and depending on what the client wants, we are their mouthpiece and their face in a way when they cannot be always in Olympia or at City Hall to talk to lawmakers and staff.
And what inspired you to become a lobbyist?
Well, I had a long career in state government, specifically working in the House of Representatives. I also worked, I did a one-year stint at City Council as well. And, you know, for me, it's always been about giving back and getting involved in doing public service. And so, you know, I wanted to transfer my skill set and my knowledge and my experience that I've attained over the years and help groups and organizations and the people that they represent really to then advance their policy objectives. And that's really made for actually a pretty good transition for me. And, you know, hopefully, obviously for the clients as well, but I think so far so good. And that's yeah, I mean, it's part of being part of the process in policy making and developing, you know, state laws or city laws, city ordinances, and having that role, if you will, in that, because it can be daunting. It can be daunting whether you're in the thick of it at the time, or even as a citizen wanting to know, hey, how can I get involved in the process? And for me, it was easy to say, yeah, I like to really continue in this endeavor and help shape state policy. Yeah, that was my reason for it.
So you've mentioned that you worked in Olympia and with Councilmember Gonzalez. How has that experience working inside the government helped inform you now working sort of outside the government, looking in?
In a variety of ways. I mean, it gives me obviously an appreciation of how things get developed and how good ideas need cooking, need a perspective, need input, and so knowing that, you know, sometimes like, oh, if I was there, I would do it this way. You can, but also just knowing a little bit about how policymakers think, how budget writers think, how the staff think, and how they help and support, and again, being able to transfer that experience that I've had to then say, okay, this is how we can get things done. This is how we coalition build. This is how we, you know, may need to talk a certain way about a certain perspective. At the same time, we also need to speak truth to power and say, hey, these are the issues that are facing communities, community X, community Y, and you need to know about it because the things that have been happening haven't been working. And now we need to rethink on a variety of things. And so it's, again, being able to know who's doing what in these decision making roles, which they're quite great and impactful statewide, as well as, again, locally here, and being able to, again, know how that place works to a certain extent, and then how to be able to center these voices that we want to center and that we want represented, and their input received in the policy making decision process.
So you work obviously with OneAmerica and with the Chief Seattle Club. Or in this webinar, we're talking about how marginalized communities are represented in represented in government and their issues. What are the main issues that you are now kind of advocating from, let's say, OneAmerica for immigrants and refugees, and Chief Seattle Club for indigenous folks?
Sure.
What are the key issues that you're looking at now?
Well, there's a lot, obviously, but, obviously we support a lot of issues, but we also lead on a variety. And, for OneAmerica, we're really looking at a couple of main issues right now. And that's really, how do we support workers, but specifically undocumented workers? As you probably know, there was a variety of stimulus packages that were authorized by Congress throughout the spring and summer to help shore up the economy and also help support workers, American workers. In those stimulus packages, though, unfortunately, folks who are not documented or folks who are not citizens were not eligible for that stimulus dollars, even though they were deemed essential workers, if you will, by the various governments. So for OneAmerica, we were part of a coalition with a whole host of other wonderful, great community advocacy groups to say, Governor Inslee and the legislature, we need you to also step up and care for these workers and treat them with the respect that they deserve, because they are frontline workers. They are doing the work that have been deemed essential. And because of their legal status, they are not able to receive funds to help make ends meet, help pay rent, put food on the table. So we're very happy this year, this summer, that the governor announced $43 million in a undocumented COVID worker relief fund that we hope is a down payment, and that we will be advocating for more, because the need is mighty. I think just in the last week, it went live, the program went live, and it was quite oversubscribed, as you can well imagine. So the need is there, and we want to keep doing it. And we also really much appreciate the efforts here at the local level. City of Seattle also stepped up and did their similar worker relief fund for city residents who are undocumented. So that's one of the main things for OneAmerica that we're pushing. We're also looking at helping stabilize, shore up, and also think the early learning and childcare system, because we're also seeing how obviously, in order to get the economy back and going and workers back to work, a lot of folks, a lot of families have children, and they need childcare services. And so we also want to make sure that community providers are seen, their input is also taken, that things that the system was in place before pre-COVID wasn't working also for them. And so again, a chance to rethink on how do we move early learning and childcare in a way that respects all communities and works for all communities, not just the providers, but the parents and the children themselves that are from minority and marginalized communities. So that, again, the big thing there is not only in rethinking that system, but also providing the funds for it, because childcare, as we all know, is extremely costly, and it's going to take a major investment by the state to help. And we've done it before. The state has done it before with providing a good amount of funding for education system. Recently, we've passed a Workforce Education Investment Act for the higher education system for all kids to be able to go to college. And now we need to look at the early learning system. So all three facets of the education pendulum. So that again is another big priority of OneAmerica. And then for Chief Seattle Club, I'll say, it's more of a localized effort, because we obviously do care for Native Alaska populations, and here, the COVID has had a massive impact on our homelessness provider system, and we've been open since COVID hit 24/7, and so. We also are in need of funds, and luckily we have some support definitely at the city council level, but also trying to get in some of the funds that are made available through the CARES Act, and making sure that Native populations are also served with outreach services. And I know there's a lot of discussions there at the City of Seattle currently underway on how to also do outreach services to homeless individuals and to get them in from off the streets.
You alluded to the pandemic. I'm just curious, as a kind of follow-up, how has the pandemic kind of impacted your efforts, especially when you're trying to help folks who are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and the economy is suffering, et cetera. So how is this working?
Yeah.
How are you able to
Well,
do this?
yeah, it's not been easy. We won't sugarcoat it. Again, some of these systems haven't been set up in a way that really speaks to immigrant communities or marginalized communities, communities of color, BIPOC communities before, and even now it's been, like you say, layer that on top, it's compounded the issue. I think there has been efforts to reach out to communities with intentionality, and to really, to be honest with you, Jeff, is also, and we've seen this this summer, we've seen this into the fall here, and we will continue to see it, is to really step back and reevaluate how people who with power, who with influence, to share that, and how to make sure that others coming along the way are part of that. And just because we're an established group or nonprofit or coalition, that we also need to recognize on stepping aside and know when to be a good ally and be a good supporter, and also kind of turn over the mic and make sure others are centered and their voices are really heard. Because there's been a lot of, we hear this, a lot of talk out there, but now we got to do the walk, right? You can do the talk, you got to walk the walk. And I think there's been a lot of self-reflection amongst many different folks involved in public policy making. How do we really reach these communities genuinely with intentionality, and making sure that their voices are really represented? And I think, we are doing all our parts to do that. And I think it's also been, it's starting to be well and more well received and accepted. And I think policymakers are also really looking and seeking that, because they're not experts as well in some of these communities, and they want to hear directly from. So that's, every time we can, we're trying to get people in front of folks, hear directly what they want versus what policymakers or even others think should be done for them.
So how can policymakers do that? How can local government better connect with immigrants and refugees and other people from marginalized communities? What are they doing that they could improve on?
Yeah, I think, Seattle's done a lot of great things, no doubt about it. And I think it's building relationships is a foundational thing. If you don't have a relationship with just one person to start, and then a group, and then an organization, and then an organization that does represent community or knows community or is from community, who looks like them, who speaks like them, building those relationships and knowing like, hey, I can count on a council member, or I can pick up the phone and talk to their staff and say, hey, there's these things in our neighborhood that are happening. That is foundational. That is something that just, I think, again, the city does well. I think we can all improve, city, county, state, all the way up to the federal government. But, it really starts locally. And I think, again, that foundational relationship and knowing who is doing great work in your backyard is I think really where it starts. Because there you will know great ideas, great initiatives, people who can't wait for government to do things for them, that they're doing it on their own. And then you say, hey, that's really great. I did not know you guys are already doing this. We're trying to rack our brains, whether it be in Olympia or City Hall, how to figure this out. And you guys already are. And maybe we should, divert some resources to you and some support and to grow. And so that again is, I think, a way. It really comes down to relationships and having and cultivating them, right? It's not just a one-time only or a check the box type situation. It's something that needs to be ongoing and sustained.
So what advice, what suggestions would you offer people who, especially from marginalized communities, who want to advocate for their positions, their cause, but don't even know where to start?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes it's easy to say, oh, come visit us, or come down to City Hall, or come to Olympia, and that's not easy for folks. That's assuming that they have the same abilities, same transportation options, same ability to take time off to do that. And so sometimes oftentimes with marginalized communities, you need to go to them, and we need to kind of flip the script in that regard. And power dynamics is a real thing. And when you have a name and a title on your door, and you want to come and talk to them about your issue, that can be intimidating for anybody, let alone someone who may be English, maybe their second language. And so again, with intentionality, I think working in the communities for the variety of mechanisms, knowing people, being there intentionally, setting up shop, having office hours in their district or in their neighborhoods, having translation services available for your town halls, all those things that say, I see you, I respect you, and I want to hear from you, versus the more traditional approach of like, my door is open, you can come on down. That's great, but that only works halfway, and it really only works for the people that are with authority or with power to do that. And again, it's a rethinking of how to be more agile and mobile and talking to directly to communities. So that's and again, it's an acknowledgement that it's not that easy, again, for folks from these communities just to say, hey, how do I start reaching out? I mean, well, anyways, I think we've already covered that. So.
Well, you mentioned that Seattle City Council or the city of Seattle is doing pretty well. How is the state doing, in your opinion, in terms of reaching out to folks?
Well, in certain aspects too, but it's a bigger entity, obviously, and with a statewide reach, there are some wonderful commissions, what we call, or the ethnic commissions, Commission on Hispanic Affairs, Asian Pacific Islander Commission, African American Commission. There's also the Governor's Office on Indian Affairs Commission, that really have been set up, and they've been actually set up for quite some time, 30, 40 years. And again, they are a way that, they have commissioners that are appointed by the governor that are from community, who again are connected to community and can be that liaison, if you will, between community and state government, and say, hey, these are things that are happening in our county or our city that are not working, or you need to know, or hey, since you advise the governor and provide recommendations and convey those to them, well, then that the governor needs to hear these things from community. And so that is a way that works pretty well. Again, can we do better? Can we do more? Sure, absolutely. And I think that's, there's an effort right now also to look at, or not look at, it's already created, the Office of Equity, a statewide Office of Equity. And again, really looking at how policies are made, and similar to the RSGI process here at the city level, the state's wanting to embark on that effort as well. And that's a bigger effort, because again, statewide, with legislation that has statewide impact. But I do applaud the community who's brought this forth, and then also the members who have said, this is where we need to go. And in the last few years, this has been happening, and now it's getting funded, and it's starting to grow. So again, those are some things that are happening at the state level. But can we do better, Jeff? Absolutely. We always can. It's a never-ending thing. So
what would you say to people who feel maybe disillusioned by the system, or disenfranchised, or left out? How can you encourage them to engage and have hope that change is possible?
Ironic as it sounds, but it's also timely. Being civically engaged means being a part of the process, and one of those things right out the gate is by voting, by having actually some feeling of you were part of something that, whether win or lose, but you were part of something. You were part of a movement. You were part of someone's platform to advance the issue. And maybe those issues are reflected with yours, and you are feeling down or disillusioned, or these folks or this system doesn't speak to me. But maybe somebody does. Somebody that now looks like you or comes from your community, knows what you have endured, and knows your background and has lived experience. That is a powerful feeling. And obviously, being successful with a good outcome for folks, then that's even more empowering, right? And then that's a building block of then feeling, hey, my vote does matter. I got involved. I'm not on the sidelines. I'm starting to think that I can get some change happening. I will tell you, I have seen that for many individual folks who one day were in a whole different, in retail or sales or whatever, and they just felt compelled. Today, I am blank, whatever it is that they are, party-wise or affiliation, and I want to get involved. And they have. And now they're in positions of influencing policy and having people's ears and knowing how to, because again, they got involved. And those are real examples. I kid you not. I won't name them, but I'm just saying that's how people, it starts there, right? And I cannot stress the importance of being civically engaged.
Well, with that, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out today to talk to me on this big election day, and really appreciate your insights, and I'm sure that the folks watching will really appreciate them as well. So Thanks again. I need to thank also Alaska Airlines, our Civic Bootcamp supporting partner, for helping us put these programs together. So with that, thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you, Jeff.
Stay safe and healthy. And
You too.
that's it.